Hello and welcome to Super Insider, Australian Retirement Trust podcast on all things investing, the economy and your superannuation. Look, it's an absolute privilege to host this wonderful podcast series. My name is Anne Fuchs. I'm the Executive General Manager of Advice, Guidance and Education here at Australian Retirement Trust, or as I call it, ART. Now, it's fabulous. My pod buddy is on the show.
Good day, Anne.
Hello,
how are you?
Joshua Van Gestel, our Senior Manager, responsible for all things education to our
Wonderful.
2.3 million members.
Wonderful to be here.
So we are, of course, just going to make sure we do the right thing and remind you that the information you're hearing today doesn't take into account your personal circumstances. And as you listen to this, you need to think about what this information means to you. Is it right for you? Of course, I would say get some personal financial advice. You can always pick up the phone and call us, and you can find all those details on our website. Now, Josh, we're here today to talk about unplanned retirement.
That's right. I think we spend a lot of our time talking about planning for retirement and maybe not spending too much time thinking about what if retirement comes early.
And actually, for a big chunk of people, that is actually the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, either due to sickness themselves, sickness of a loved one, it could have been a partner or a parent, or if there had been a major change in their employment, such as a redundancy.
I mean, if you're you're a blue collar worker or in a caring profession and you're back finally,
that you just can't keep going.
Yeah, packs it in.
Yeah. And I think you couple that with the other consideration that we have seen superannuation access age, or preservation age we call it, has actually been increasing. And so I think that's almost making the problem even worse for some. And I think it raises a couple of questions that maybe we do explore. The first is, well, what do you do when that happens? What do you do when all of a sudden, unexpectedly, you're
forced into a situation where you've got to stop working.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I think we have to really think about what they can do there. But I think the second thing we should then be also thinking about is, well, for those people that aren't yet in that situation, and let's hope it doesn't occur, but how do you actually prepare for that if it does?
And I will say, I'm going to highlight some research we did recently for that second category, that about 25% of Australians haven't checked their super balance in the last 12 months. So there is a call to action here. If you're 50 or 55 and you're one of those that haven't checked, and unplanned retirement might be something that happens to you.
Yep.
Then you need to log on.
And it's also, though, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but for a lot of those people who do log on, well, great, I'm glad they're doing it. But the vast majority of them sort of go, well, do I have enough? And I don't think they ask that question about what will happen if it comes early. What will happen if retirement comes early?
Okay, so let's play. All right, so how do you want to break this up?
Well, do we actually go back to the situations hit you?
Okay, yeah.
What should you be thinking about?
Yes, and let's say we're assuming that so there are time frames too. There's retirement's feels like a really long way away, and actually you're only a year or two off from actually being eligible for the age pension. So there's probably that dynamic to it as well.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably the first thing. How close to retirement are you actually in the first place? So you can generally start accessing your super at the age of 60, and then you've got the age pension that is going to be accessible to you when you're 67. So it's thinking about, well, if I'm already close to that, do I only just have a short term that I need to think about? And that short term, you really have to ask yourself questions like, what other investments do I have that I can call on? Do I have emergency funding and savings that I can call on? Do I have insurance within my superannuation fund? If I'm forced in retirement because I'm unwell, then is there something that I can actually do?
A lot of people are taking a mortgage into, they've got a mortgage up until the end of their working life. So, that'll be the reality for a lot of people too.
Absolutely, that we're seeing more people go into retirement with debt than ever. So I think it's firstly asking yourself, well, how close are you to retirement and what gap you have to fill? But I think the second thing is then thinking about what you said. Well, if I've also got debt to manage, maybe I'm much further out from retirement than, I'm not just a couple of years away, I might be 10 years away. That's where you're really going to have to think about getting some guidance and assistance. And that can well be from your superannuation fund in seeking some advice. It could also, though, just be going to some of those basic areas of, if you've got a big mortgage debt, if you're challenged by it, if your circumstances have changed, ring your bank. Talk to them about what you can actually do. Again, depending how close you are to retirement, does it actually allow you to think about, do you downsize?
Let's talk about downsizer. It is a phenomenon that continues to grow. Yep. People who lived in the family home that probably, wasn't a lot of money and now is worth a lot more. And it is an opportunity to be able to, you can't eat your house. I think that saying goes.
Absolutely. You can't just eat the bedroom. No. So with Downsizer, it's actually an initiative that the government brought in a few years ago, and it's now become accessible to many more people. So if you've owned your own home for 10 years or more and you're over the age of 55, you may actually be eligible to have part of that downsize from selling the property put into your superannuation. And that's up to $300,000 per individual. So part of the financial solution here of retiring early may actually be thinking about, how do you use that bigger asset you have in your home?
So you've got a downsizer. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you are 60. Well, just hypothetically, you're 60. You, for whatever reason, having to stop work has been put upon you. You are in a position where selling your house is actually is a viable option. How does a member, or maybe 60 is not the right age, but in terms of making the decision to start drawing an income stream and the best way to approach that decision?
So if you, as we said earlier, if you're age 60, you can start to access your super. So to set up a retirement income stream is actually a really simple process, a much simpler process than it used to be. And I think it's where you think about, okay, I've been forced into this situation and my employment income has cut off. How do I now convert my super to replace that in effect? Okay. So you can absolutely just move your superannuation, move that into retirement phase and just be drawing down an income. But you also have the ability at age 60 to, if you need those lump sum amounts, you can actually be taking out withdrawals. And that might be, for example, to look after that debt you have or those things you need to deal with.
And I think for our listeners, just knowing that income that you're taking out isn't taxed.
It's
not taxed. Not like,
so over the age of 60, the income that you're drawing down is tax-free. The investment earnings you're making are tax-free. Any withdrawals, any lump sum withdrawals you take are also tax-free. If you have a transition to retirement account, the one point of difference to a regular income account to be aware of is that those earnings that you make on your TTR are actually still going to be taxable. So it is a very, very different time in your superannuation journey, and you do get those tax benefits from it.
If you're in that position where you're 60 and this has happened to you and you had actually been trying, wanting to get your super to a bigger balance, you were saying, maybe I can retire at 65. I'm going to work a bit longer so my balance is higher. This has been thrust upon you. There are strategies, if you're worried about money lasting, I guess, there are strategies that can be put in place so that the money can last, or you can maybe, not worry about that as much.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to just ask yourself the question, well, actually, am I going to be okay? Okay, so I think you might actually find, and we often see this with members, that they're going to be in a better financial position than they may otherwise think. Okay, so the first thing is just assess your situation. You might be 5 years out from where you planned, but what it might mean is that you just have to change your expectations a little bit, or you might see that there are some basic things you can do around your investment decisions, for example, that can actually just help to grow that balance that you've got. Remembering you're at a stage in your life where your superannuation balance is now very big, potentially in terms of your accumulation, and now a lot of the heavy lifting can be done by investment performance. So investment performance is key. Downsizer contribution, as we've talked about, is another opportunity. But the other thing is that when we see people with retirement be thrust upon them, you might actually find that you go into part-time employment. It might be a very different type of employment. But if you do go into some form of retirement, that still gives you access to super guarantee. It still gives you the ability to think actually about, well, do I just access my super as a transition to retirement income? And so effectively you're still saving while you're also using your super to supplement your income. I guess the main point of all of that is if you have the situation thrust upon you, I guess the first thing you're going to do is maybe panic. You'll get concerned. You'll have a lot of questions. Seek that guidance and advice to look at your specific circumstance.
Yeah, don't go making any decisions without speaking to some people for sure.
And I think early retirement will always be different for every single
And I should say,
individual.
speak to some people, speak to your super fund specifically,
Yes,
or a qualified financial advisor. Yes.
But the other thing I think is it's also, for many of our listeners, this might actually be a wake-up call, okay? This might be for some of our listeners the idea, as you said earlier, I'm in a job, I may not be able to keep on going, okay? Physically, I may not be able to keep on going. Or they've got some health niggles that they think, well, could this actually come up and force a situation? So I'd say to our listeners who maybe aren't in this situation, this is a really good wake-up call to maybe just prepare. Make sure that your insurances are set up and right, okay? And I think also think about, can I make additional contributions now? Can I be thinking about my investments now to try and get a bit stronger in performance?
And the reality is insurance and super are like peas and carrots, or bangers and mash, or
they're siblings.
Yes, champagne and cheese. But because if you don't have the insurance, then you might be in a position where there's financial hardship and you're needing to then draw your money out of super, which means then when you are older, you'll have not the money you need to live on. And insurance, so many of us now are getting a material sort of illness.
Yep.
But because our health system is so great, we're surviving it, but we're out of work, for potentially a couple of years or never back to full time. So there's this whole concept of really making sure that you've got a plan in place.
And it's funny, Anne, I haven't thought of this until now you've said it.
Yeah.
But the thing I say to people, I present to thousands of people a year. I love it.
Really? I had no idea.
But what I say to them is your super is there to plan for retirement. Your insurance is there if retirement actually comes early or if you don't make it to retirement. So I do think the wake-up call here is to think about your insurance. Think also about something that's really fundamental for all of us, have an emergency fund. But also check in on your super. We want more people who are actually looking at their super balance. But ask yourself the question, is it enough and would it be enough?
Doing nothing is going to exacerbate that problem.
And for the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, people even getting close to 60, what I always say is that as you age, every decision you make to put more money in super or to look at your investments, the younger you are, the bigger impact it's going to have. As you age, you just need to think about maybe taking those steps more often and maybe making them a bit more purposeful. But to your point, if I'm a 40-year-old and I look at my balance and it's not where it should be, some really small, simple steps like making a smaller regular contribution by making an investment change can really set you up for a much better retirement outcome or early retirement outcome. The other thing to think about if you do get made redundant and you're receiving that redundancy payment, you're probably trying to work out, do I actually use that to pay off debts? Do I put it in other investments? The other thing to consider is that you can actually make that as a personal contribution into your superannuation as well to just help grow that balance a little bit further for you.
So I guess the message to our listeners is that retirement does happen by surprise for a lot of Australians, and we as a country are getting much better at looking after our health and our well-being and exercising. But as humans, if you've got your loved ones, your health and financial security, and if one of them are out of kilter, you're out of kilter. So what we're saying is, knowing that retirement might be put upon you by surprise, there's some stuff you can do today.
Absolutely. And I think the first thing, check in on your super. If you need to have a conversation, have it. And for those people who are in that situation, reach out.
Yeah.
I think it's important they know they're not alone, and we are here to help. We are here to give guidance. And there is also financial counselling that's available to people, both through us but more broadly.
Yes.
And people should really lean in on
the
that.
Centrelink Financial Counselling. But so certainly it would be obviously a natural human reaction to be really stressed and worried, but to not just internalise that, pick up the phone. There are strategies you can put in place, and certainly here at Australian Retirement Trust, we have a team of education and advice and guidance professionals to help our members with that. Look, Josh.
Fabulous, Anne.
Yeah, good chat. Good
Thank
chat.
you.
Bit of a heavy chat, but a good one.
It is.
And what will we say to our listeners? They should all be subscribing, I reckon.
I think they should all subscribe, and hopefully this actually,
tell your family and friends.
It's a down and dark subject, but I think it's also one with purpose and give some optimism.
Yeah, so I'd say tell your family and friends. If you're one of these motivated people that's done something about it, then you need to hustle the people that you love around this subject matter and tell them all to subscribe to Super Insider, and we'll look forward to you joining us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.